Welcome. This is all minus one quick shots. Folks, all week I have been talking about mental, emotional, and spiritual slavery. I've been talking about how to set yourself free, realizing first that you are in this state, and then understanding that as you go forward, trying to live a better life, trying to free yourself from these restrictions, trying to free yourself from this old mindset, you have to understand you will falter. You will come back to your preset programming. And you must make no mistake about this, whether it be a spiritual battle where you are, let's say, abiding in Christ and you do something that you would say was missing the mark or sinful, then you have to put that aside and say, look, I messed up. You can beat yourself up about it forever, but it isn't the end of the world. What is the end of the world is if you go, well, I messed up, therefore I'm no good, therefore I'm just going to continue to do this behavior that I don't like that I do with myself. I don't like myself because I do this behavior, right? That's a defeatist mindset. That is that slave mindset. What you need to do instead is say, I made a mistake. I did something that I really hate about myself, and I am going to change that. And though I may fall back to this position again, I'm going to do everything consciously to decide that this will not be my life and I will not allow it to rule me. And so yesterday I talked about some things that you can do, some things you can think about and concentrate on and focus on to move yourself forward away from this old mindset. And I specifically mentioned humility. Humility, in part, is that you are not a perfect being. See, folks that live in sin, or folks that live in defeat, folks that live in mental and emotional and spiritual slavery, they think that they're wonderful. They think they're great people. They tend to be very self-centered, very arrogant, many a thing. And the one thing they are not, usually ever, is humble. Why? Because humbleness makes you see your true self. And with humility, I also mentioned being truly honest with yourself. Stop telling yourself the lie. How many of you out there have done something because someone has told you you should do it, and you thought to yourself, I don't agree with that? Now, I'm not talking about, we have to figure out things sometimes. There is advice out there that you should try. But you knew in the depths of your heart, you got some advice and you're like, that's just not for me. And I don't mean about, self-growth or anything else. I mean like, come to this party because it'll be fun, or let's do this thing because it will be fun. And you are thinking in the back of your head, I don't know. But then you want to be one of the cool kids, or you want to not seem lame, right? You are doing something against your own will. You are violating your own morals, your own virtues. And because of that, you actually have disempowered yourself and are now following someone else as a slave. They have just become your master because you're doing it to impress them or anyone else. Stop doing things to impress others. Start doing things that you wish to do. Like, this is very, very important because these are things that I really wish I would have been taught in my youth. Now, I know maybe there was some after-school program somewhere or some in-school program, growing up in school in the 80s, we had DARE and that kind of stuff. There might have been something about that, but that stuff wears off after you're out of elementary school. And then you become rebellious. And your relationship with your parents is very important. And I had pretty good parents, but I try to do better than they did with me. Now, I make my own mistakes with my daughter and the little girl I'm about to have here in a few months. I'm sure I will make more mistakes, but I'm much older and wiser than when I had my first child. And in that, I know that I need to press forward. And one of the things that I did with my daughter was I was brutally honest with her about my mistakes. See, that takes humility. Instead of saying that I am some puffed up individual, I have told her nearly every sin I have ever committed in my life. And why have I done that? Because I don't want her to have to live the life that I led, a life that was stifled for years because I made poor decisions as a young man following my passions. And I don't mean like my inner desire passions. I mean like my frivolous passions. Things that don't come with big payoffs in the end. Making mistakes, ignoring red flags, doing things because I thought that's what other people expected of me. Because again, I was not living in freedom. I was a slave to a certain mindset and mentality. I was a slave to my emotions. This is another thing that you must understand is your emotions are fleeting, folks. Do not be a slave to them. When you feel an emotion like anger or sadness, really start to analyze it. And again, be very honest. And I'm not saying you cannot be angry or sad. There are legitimate reasons to be angry or sad. But let's not take things out of context. Let's not fly off the deep end when someone says something to you that you misunderstood or you found maybe insulting. Instead, a better approach is to say, maybe there's some truth in what they're saying. In fact, I would say that most people that fly off the deep end are not well adjusted, are slaves to their emotions, and they will never be honest with themselves, which is why when someone else is honest with them, they freak out. This is a huge problem in the world today. And part of this, too, is self-discipline. Like, you can have whatever issues, deficiencies you have. Like, so, for instance, just, real quick, I mention them often because I'm very transparent. Like, I am dyslexic, so that is a deficiency in some ways. In other ways, it's an asset. But it makes reading difficult. I mix up words. I say things backwards sometimes, especially numbers. There are things, but there is an asset to it, and that it kind of makes you a global thinker, and you can connect dots that other people don't generally connect. And I don't see it as a deficiency, as it affects about 1/3 of the population. It's just a different kind of brain functioning than the majority. Another way, deficiency of course I've had, sometimes I struggle with and other times I don't, is that I have a lustfulness for women. I find women very attractive. This is just a reality, a thing of who I am. And it's not just every woman. I'm actually rather particular about looks and stuff like that. But like, that's just a thing. And then at a point in my life, I gave over, especially after my first marriage had failed. I gave into those craven feelings, and I went down a path that I never would have violated and went down before, a violation of my own moral, ethical codes. Now, of course, I did some of that when I was younger too, but that again is the stuff I'm talking about. See, I allowed myself to violate those codes of mine and become enslaved. And then because of that, I lived with all these issues and problems for years. And honestly, if it wasn't for my daughter having some sort of anchor to hold me down and to ground me, to something to live for, I don't know how I would have made it out. I'm not saying it would have been possible, but I probably would not be the guy that is here talking to you today, that even though my stuff isn't perfect, it is like 1,000 times better than where it was 5 years ago, I can promise. Right before I met my current wife, I was a mess. And it was 1.5 years of me trying to really dig down deep into my soul and really revamping my spirituality and really being humble before the Lord and honest with myself and hating things that I once was, that I was able to find freedom. So self-discipline is very important. You need to correct yourself. You need to know when you're thinking poorly, wrongly about yourself or the things that you're doing. Don't follow the crowd, folks. Be authentic to yourself. With that, there is accountability. And again, you are accountable to no one but God in the end. But you should have a high standard of integrity in which you hold yourself to, and others can see in you. And they'll know that immediately. Because when you say you're going to do something, you do it. You give your word without having to give your word. Another way that you can truly free yourself is to get rid of your materialistic life. I went through this process. There's still a ton of stuff that I have that I need to get rid of, but I literally stripped out so much stuff from my home. I got rid of so many things. And again, I faltered. I fell to a place where I started acquiring material possessions again, primarily books. I'm a bit of a book whore, if you would. I have quite a few books. Most of them are downstairs in my living area, but yeah, I have books in boxes. My wife kind of gets annoyed with the amount of books that I own, but I haven't been doing that lately. I haven't been looking at or buying that many books, because I have been preoccupied with learning other things, and I'm just a guy that really likes to constantly learn and grow and improve. But the point is that I have a lot of things, especially clothes, and I've given so much away. One of the things that I did that was a interesting personal experiment, didn't quite work out the best for me, but it also taught me many great lessons, is I had a spare bedroom, and I took two separate women into my home who needed help. Neither one of them turned out that well. I mean, the other one eventually the first one got on her feet of sorts, but there were issues there with her personality and who she was. And the other one was a recovering drug addict who unfortunately relapsed that I had to basically kick out. But, those are things that how many of you do stuff like that? Like, you take on things. How many of you give charity? How many of you do personal things? Again, I'm not here to brag, just as small examples I'm trying to give you. Like I've mentioned before, I gave a ride to my neighbor some weeks back so she could get to the dealership because her car wasn't working for, I forget what it was. She needed a replacement key or something like that. I don't recall. In any case, how many of you take your time to give to others is really the question. Because you might think that is an obligation, that you make that an obligation, but I'm not talking about an obligation that someone holds you to, like a job, right, or an appointment. No, I'm talking about to freely say, I wish to do things for other people that is helpful to them and for them. And I'm not saying that's always going to work out for you well. Sometimes it is that great personal sacrifice. But you learn that way, and again, we go back to that humility thing. You become humbled, especially when you're trying to do something good and it doesn't work out. It's very humbling. And that shows you even more that you are a slave to certain ideas and you need to rethink things, recalculate, recalibrate. So again, folks, I have been talking about this more or less all week. I didn't Monday, I don't think. But the reason why the world is where it is at currently is because most people are literally mental slaves. You're a slave to the MSN and the Fox News and the CNN, the ABCs, the CBSs, the New York Times, the Washington Post, whatever it may be. You're a slave to the mainstream. You're a slave to the culture of what is put out by the academia and the Hollywoods, right? And the Netflix and the intersectionalism. You're a slave to these things because you just want to go along to get along. You are not an autonomous being, I can promise you. Freedom creates autonomy. Freedom creates independence, self-reliance. Everything else, my friends, is mental, emotional, and spiritual slavery. And lastly on that, the spiritual side of things, the attitudinal. Well, there's no way that I know that you can acquire this fully without a higher power. Now, perhaps there are some that do. I don't know. But you have to believe in something greater than yourself, I would say. Perhaps it could be an ideal, and not necessarily a deity. The prediction of Nietzsche was that that God had died based on rationality and science, and that men were going to have to become supermen to overcome that, because otherwise totalitarian governments would take over as the state became the replacement for God. Now, my criticism of that from Nietzsche is not that he wasn't right. It's that that has always been the case. The state has always been man's God. That is what the book of Revelations is about largely. That is what the warnings of the Bible are about. We can go all the way back to the Israelites and what they struggled with. Recall that God himself told the Israelites that they did not want a king, and they continued to ask for one. And Samuel said, okay, here's what God said you're going to get from it. He's going to tax you. He's going to send your young men to war. He's going to have your women do labor for men that aren't their husbands. It's going to cause this. It's going to cause that. But they wanted to be like the other nations. They asked for their enslavement. And many of us do. Many of us ask to be enslaved because we do not think that we are capable. And honestly, I know I'm not capable, but anything I'm not capable of, guess what? I got somebody upstairs that's watching over me that I have a relationship with that will take over as long as I allow him to do so. As long as I'm allowed, or I allow myself to be humble enough to give that over to him and say, God, I cannot handle this. Do what you will. Do your will. Bring the things to my life that I need to help me overcome this, or if I must, allow me to struggle in this thing and it not be in vain. And see, that's some humility, folks. You just simply saying, I don't know. And how many times do you talk to an expert who pretends they know something? I can think of one that's been in the government who's the highest paid employee right now. It's not been right about much of anything, but in any case, that's about all I have, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this for the last week. I think I'll probably get on something else next week. Maybe I'll be talking about politics. I don't feel the need to, because it's just business as usual, man. Like, it really is. One of the exciting things about with Trump was, at least when he did stuff, the establishment freaked out constantly, and it was quite hilarious. I mean, that was the beauty of Trump. Maybe you like the establishment, but if that's the case, you're a slave, my friends, and you're not a free person. So with all that said, folks, this has been All Minus One Quick Shots, and I wish you all well.